Beneath the peaceful hills of northern Italy, tucked under an ordinary-looking house in a quiet village, lies something that seems impossible. An underground world carved entirely by hand. A place filled with stained glass, sacred geometry, vast halls, and walls etched with ancient symbols. And for nearly 15 years, no one knew it was there. It wasn't built by a famous architect, or sponsored by the government. It wasn't even legal. It was the vision of one man, a former gas station owner named Roberto Airaudi, who claimed he saw it all in a dream. That was only the beginning. Because what lay hidden beneath the surface wasn't just stone and art, it was a belief system, one that blended mysticism, science fiction, sacred geometry, and something that felt a little like a cult. But how did a man with no architectural background pull off one of the greatest underground construction feats in modern history without anyone knowing? And what's still hidden behind those sealed walls today? He called himself Falco, the hawk, a symbol of vision, intuition, and higher perception. And he claimed that, ever since childhood, he'd been having vivid dreams. Dreams of complex underground temples, shimmering halls, and a forgotten ancient civilization that once understood the true nature of the universe. Falco believed those dreams weren't just fantasy, they were memories. He said he had lived before, in a time when humans were more connected to cosmic energy, sacred knowledge, and spiritual purpose, and he believed he'd been reborn with a mission, to rebuild what had been lost. At first, the people around him thought it was harmless, just philosophy, poetic metaphors, maybe even an artistic escape. But Falco's vision went far beyond words. He didn't just want to talk about sacred architecture, he wanted to create it, from scratch, underground. And somehow, he started to convince others to help him. A small group gathered around him in the late 1970s. Friends, artists, thinkers. They were drawn to his presence, his ideas, his confidence that something profound was waiting to be revealed. He spoke of energy lines running through the earth, of symbols with power, of architecture as a bridge between the human soul and the divine. He told them that this temple needed to be built, not someday, but now, and not in a public square or on a holy mountain, but hidden, in silence, beneath his house. No one asked for blueprints, there weren't any. Falco said he knew exactly where every hall, column, and fresco should go, because he had already seen them, in detail, in his dreams. It began quietly, no permits, no announcements, just a few tools, a cellar, and a group of people who believed in something bigger than themselves. By day, they went about their lives, teachers, artists, workers, ordinary people. But by night, they gathered in the shadows beneath Roberto Airaudi's modest home. And together, they began to dig. They started with a small passage. Hand tools only. No machines, the noise would be too suspicious. Every piece of soil, every rock, was hauled out manually. They didn't sell the dirt or dump it publicly. Instead, they hid it in false walls, buried it in gardens, or stashed it in hidden rooms. The operation had to remain invisible, even to neighbors. It wasn't just a few weeks of work, or months. The digging lasted 15 years. What they were building wasn't a tunnel. It was a cathedral, or rather, a network of cathedrals, each chamber reflecting a different spiritual concept, a different force of human nature. They called it the Temples of Humanity. And with every night that passed, it grew deeper, more intricate, more alive. The ceilings were high. The walls were painted in vivid colors. Mosaics shimmered with sacred symbols and celestial imagery. Some rooms resembled ancient Egyptian temples. Others looked like echoes from Atlantis or dreams of the future. Time seemed to collapse underground, as though each hall belonged to a different civilization entirely. There were no construction plans, no architects. Falco led the design based purely on what he remembered. Visions he claimed were from past lives, ancient knowledge that had long been buried with the earth. And yet, somehow, it worked. It held. What they created beneath the Alps was nothing short of miraculous. A vast, hidden temple complex, engineered in total secrecy, without formal training, funding, or approval. And still, no one knew. Not the neighbors, not the local authorities, not even the people living in the village directly above the temple. But this wasn't just a story of architecture or ambition. According to those inside, something else was happening underground. Something they said couldn't be explained. To outsiders, the underground temples seemed surreal, maybe even theatrical. But to those who built them, every color, every symbol, every curve in the stone had meaning. These weren't just rooms. They were energetic portals, tools for transformation, a map of the human experience told through sacred geometry and light. Falco and his followers named their growing community Damanhur, after an ancient Egyptian city believed to have been a center of divine knowledge. And within the temples, they created 7 main halls, each one representing a different spiritual force. The Hall of Water was soft and dreamlike, a tribute to feminine energy, emotion, and the flow of life. The Hall of Earth, carved from raw stone, was grounded and powerful, symbolizing stability, identity, and belonging. The Hall of Spheres was perhaps the most mysterious, believed to be a chamber aligned with synchronic lines, invisible currents of energy said to run beneath the earth, connecting sacred sites and ancient temples worldwide. One chamber, known as the Labyrinth, was a walk-through mosaic of every major religion and spiritual path in human history, from Sumerian carvings to Buddhist mandalas, Celtic knots to Egyptian gods. It wasn't about choosing one belief. It was about weaving them all together. And then there was the Hall of Mirrors, with golden reflections and stained glass windows, a space said to help amplify human consciousness. A place not for prayer, but for activation, where the human mind could touch the divine. But these weren't just pretty metaphors. To the members of Damanhur, the temples were alive, part of a sacred architecture that resonated with cosmic laws. They believed the structure itself could heal, that it could open spiritual channels, enhance intuition, even connect humanity with other realms. Visitors often described feeling an energy shift, like stepping into another dimension. Some called it peace, others called it overwhelming. Even today, no one truly knows how deep the tunnels go, or how much remains hidden behind the sealed doors and incomplete chambers. But what's clear is this. For Falco, the temples were never just about art or faith. They were part of a larger system, a spiritual technology meant to awaken the planet, one room at a time. For nearly 15 years, they got away with it. Night after night, they dug, painted, sculpted, expanding the temples in total silence beneath the feet of an unsuspecting town. Not a single blueprint was filed, no inspections, no oversight, just belief, secrecy, and trust in Falco's vision. But nothing stays hidden forever. In 1992, a former member of the community allegedly tipped off Italian authorities. What exactly was said remains unclear. But the message was enough to trigger a full-scale investigation. Local officials arrived expecting to uncover an illegal extension or tax evasion scheme. What they found instead left them speechless. Beneath a modest house in a quiet village, the Italian government stumbled upon one of the most elaborate underground structures ever built without permission. Multiple floors, sprawling chambers, intricate mosaics, enormous carved statues, all hidden in total secrecy. It didn't make sense. Who had engineered this? Where were the structural permits? How had no one heard the digging? There were no official answers. Just a vast temple complex buried in the earth, built entirely by a group that claimed to follow dreams and energy lines rather than laws. Authorities moved quickly. The site was sealed off. An emergency stop order was issued. There were talks of destruction, legal action, possibly even arrests. For a moment, it seemed like the temple might be demolished before the world ever saw what had been created. But something happened the government didn't expect. Word spread fast, both online and in the Italian press. Pictures of the temple leaked, the murals, the stained glass, the hand-sculpted figures. It didn't look like some underground cult bunker. It looked sacred. Artists, scholars, journalists, and ordinary citizens began speaking out. They didn't understand the beliefs, but they understood the craftsmanship and the passion behind it. What was once dismissed as madness started to look like something else entirely. Was this really a danger to the public? Or was it a work of art worth protecting? Eventually, the pressure worked. The government backed down, on one condition. The group would need to bring the entire structure up to code, submit to inspections, and operate above board from that point forward. Damanhur would not be shut down, but their days of secrecy were over. Once the temples were exposed, everything changed. What had once thrived in shadows now had to survive in the light. The Italian government, under public and media pressure, chose not to destroy the underground complex. But that didn't mean the group was free from consequences. Suddenly, Damanhur found itself under intense scrutiny. Architectural inspections, tax audits, safety evaluations, zoning violations. It wasn't just a spiritual sanctuary anymore. It was a construction project with decades of unauthorized work. The community scrambled to comply with legal demands, racing to submit retroactive plans and bring the temples in line with building codes. For a while, their very survival was on the line. But what truly fractured public opinion wasn't the architecture. It was the ideology. As more reporters visited the site, the question shifted from how they built the temples to why. Who were these people, really? What did they believe? Were they an artistic collective? A New Age spiritual movement? Or something closer to a cult? Critics, including some former members, began speaking out. They described Damanhur as hierarchical, insular, and emotionally manipulative. Some claimed that members were pressured to cut ties with family, surrender personal assets, and devote their lives entirely to the teachings of Falco. Rumors circulated about rigid internal rules, social control masked as spiritual alignment, and blind loyalty to a leader who claimed to remember past lives in Atlantis. None of this was illegal, but it raised uncomfortable questions, especially in a country still sensitive to the legacy of fascism and manipulation of belief. Damanhur responded by doubling down on transparency. They opened their doors to guided tours. They published literature, invited journalists, and emphasized their values of peace, ecology, and self-discovery. To the public, it looked like an effort to rebrand. To insiders, it felt like survival. And still, the temples remained open, untouched. Even as the world argued about what Damanhur truly was, no one could deny the beauty, or the mystery, of what had been built beneath the Alps. Today, Damanhur is no longer hidden. It's a registered spiritual eco-community with hundreds of members, multiple campuses, and visitors from around the world. What started as an underground secret has become a destination, part commune, part mystery school, part living work of art. They offer workshops, tours, and spiritual technology training. Their teachings are a mix of meditation, sacred geometry, reincarnation, and something called selfica, a concept they describe as an ancient science of harnessing intelligent energy through copper coils and symbolic shapes. To outsiders, it sounds like science fiction. To believers, it's a rediscovered wisdom meant to help humanity evolve. Walking through the temples today, you'd see tourists standing beside altars of light, listening to guides speak about cosmic frequencies and the alignment of the human soul with galactic memory. There are no uniforms, no chanting, no overt control. Everything feels calm, welcoming, carefully curated. But not everything is open. Several chambers are still sealed. Entire hallways remain inaccessible to the public. Some are said to be under renovation, others described as too energetically sensitive for outsiders to enter. No photos, no footage, just silence. Some visitors say it's part of the mystique. Others suspect the group is still hiding things behind the beauty, beliefs, rituals, or unfinished projects that would change how the world sees them. And yet, people keep coming. Academics, artists, spiritual seekers, and the simply curious, drawn to the idea that somewhere beneath the surface, there's a place where logic and legend, past lives and sacred symbols all meet in stone. The community insists that Damanhur isn't about worship. It's about discovery, about unlocking the hidden potential inside every person, about building a future rooted in imagination, art, and purpose. But as the movement grows and the stories surrounding it deepen, one thing becomes harder to ignore. It all still centers around one man, Falco. And long after his death, his presence lingers everywhere. In the artwork, in the rituals, in the rules and language that shape daily life within Damanhur's borders. Which raises the question, did he really create something that frees people's minds, or something that holds them in place just under a more beautiful name? Even now, decades after the first stone was carved beneath that quiet Italian hillside, the temples of humanity still haven't revealed all their secrets. There are doors visitors aren't allowed to open, corridors that end abruptly, chambers that appear on old maps but aren't part of the tour. The official explanation is always the same: construction, preservation, energy sensitivity. But for a place rooted in transparency and spiritual evolution, the silence speaks volumes. One room in particular draws speculation: the Hall of Spheres. According to Damanhur, it's a chamber built on a powerful intersection of what they call synchronic lines, invisible streams of energy that crisscross the planet, linking sacred sites like the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, and Machu Picchu. The community believes this room acts like a transmitter, capable of amplifying human thought, connecting consciousness across the globe, even across dimensions. To believers, it's a sacred space meant for collective evolution. To skeptics, it's an idea pulled from science fiction. But either way, it remains largely off limits. No full photos, no videos, just glimpses. Then, there are the rumors, whispered stories about a second temple, even deeper underground. Some claim it's already been partially excavated, hidden beneath the existing structure. Others say Falco never stopped planning its design, even on his deathbed. Whether it exists or not, the mystery feeds something primal, the sense that the real story of Damanhur hasn't been told yet, and maybe never will be. There are also whispers of lost rituals, ones that were abandoned after the government crackdown, of symbolic initiations, dream interpretation circles, and secret teachings that weren't written down. Today, the community distances itself from anything that sounds too esoteric. But ask the right person, in the right room, and you might hear a different version of the past. What's most haunting isn't what's been shown. It's what remains unseen, behind locked doors, beneath the earth, or perhaps hidden in plain sight. Because in Damanhur, belief is the architecture, and reality bends to those who believe hard enough.